Good afternoon, everyone. Dear students, today we will be reading Chapter 4 from our book Snapshots. Albert Einstein at School, written by Pringle. The author, a famous biographer, Patrick Pringle, was born in 1917 in London. He has written many books. The story that we are going to read today is taken from his book The Young Einstein. Albert Einstein was born in Ulm, Germany, in 1879. He is arguably the most influential scientist of the 20th century. On this photo, Einstein is 12 years old. This is a photo from 1895. It shows Einstein at the time when his family was moving to Milan, Italy. Einstein's theory of relativity changed our understanding of space and time, becoming one of the two pillars of modern physics, the other one being quantum mechanics. The German-born physicist's intellectual achievements and originality have made the word Einstein synonymous with genius. He is best known to the general public for his formula, which has been dubbed the world's most famous equation. His work is also known for its influence on the philosophy of science. As well as being the philosophical scientist he was, Einstein was also a musician. He was playing piano from early age, but he was more fond of violin. It's little known that Einstein was an accomplished violinist, and even less known that had he not pursued science, he said he would have been a musician. He played several instruments. Einstein received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921 for his services to theoretical physics and especially for his discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect. Einstein published more than 300 scientific papers and more than 150 non-scientific works. The chapter Albert Einstein at School is an extract from the biography of Albert Einstein, written by Patrick Pringle. It is called The Young Einstein. In this chapter, Patrick, the author, familiarizes the reader with those years in Einstein's life when he was struggling each day in school, and as each day passed, the school diploma felt like a far-fetched dream. The story throws light upon a few encounters with his teacher, what he felt about the neighborhood he lived in, and how he had only one good friend, Yuri. The way Albert manages to get out of this miserable place, as he calls it, the school, and how things turned around in the end, makes the story even more interesting. The story has few main characters. Albert Einstein, who is a student at that time. Mr. Brown, who was his teacher, his history teacher. Yuri, who is Einstein's friend. Elsa, who was Einstein's cousin. Another character is Dr. Ernst Weil. And another two characters are Mr. Koch, who was Einstein's math teacher. And then there is a character of head teacher, who is an administrator. This chapter begins with an encounter. Albert's encounter with his history teacher, where the teacher is asking him about a particular date from the history. And as usual, Einstein doesn't know the answer. This biographical piece discusses the childhood of Albert Einstein, and it starts with this disagreement on rote learning with his history teacher. Einstein wanted to get away from the system of education followed in Munich, so he decided to get a doctor's certificate declaring that he was not well. This certificate was supposed to declare that he has had a nervous breakdown and needs rest for 6 months. Only his maths teacher admired Einstein for his brilliance. But before Einstein could get an appointment with the head teacher to present the certificate, which he got at the end, he was asked by the head teacher to leave the school due to poor conduct. So Einstein felt happy on leaving the school. Albert Einstein is regarded as the greatest physicist since Newton. In the following extract from the young Einstein, the well-known biographer Patrick Pringle describes the circumstances which led to Albert Einstein's expulsion from a German school. So, as we said, this chapter is taken from The Young Einstein, written by Patrick Pringle. The Young Einstein is a biography about Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein is regarded, he is considered as the greatest physicist since Newton. Physicist is an expert of physics or a student of physics. Newton is the name of another physicist. In the following extract from The Young Einstein, the well-known biographer Patrick Pringle describes the circumstances. Biographer, we said, is a person who writes an account of someone's life. In this extract, the author describes the circumstances, the conditions, the situation which led to Einstein's expulsion from a German school. Expulsion means forced removal. It means the act of forcing something or someone out, the act of expelling someone or something. Expulsion refers to the action of forcing someone to leave a place, such as a country, a school, or an organization. In what year, Einstein? Asked the history teacher. Did the Prussians defeat the French at Waterloo? I don't know, sir. Why don't you know? You've been told it often enough. I must have forgotten. Did you ever try to learn? Asked Mr. Brown. No, sir, Albert replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Why not? I can't see any point in learning dates. One can always look them up in a book. As we mentioned earlier, this chapter begins with Albert's encounter with his history teacher, where the teacher is asking him about this particular date. He is asking him, in what year did the Prussians defeat the French at Waterloo? Prussian is a person born or living in Prussia, a state in Europe, now a part of Germany. Waterloo refers to a battle, the place where the battle had taken place. The teacher is asking Einstein, in what year did the Prussians defeat? Defeat means they won. The Prussians won against French. Einstein says he doesn't know. Mr. Brown again asks, why don't you know? You've been told it often enough. Often enough means number of times. Quite often. Einstein says, I must have forgotten. Mr. Brown again asks, did you ever try to learn? And what is Einstein's reply? No, sir. He replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Unthinking here means without thinking, spontaneous, thoughtless, acting without proper consideration of the consequences. So he replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Honesty refers to truthfulness, straightforwardness. He was straightforward. He said, I can't see any point in learning dates. One can always look them up in a book. To look something up means to check a fact or get some information about something. If you're not sure what the word means, you can look it up in a dictionary. So to look something up is a phrasal verb. It means some search for information or a fact using book, computer, and so on. So this was Einstein's reply. He said that one can always search them in a book. One can always look for them in the book. Albert doesn't know the answer. This moment leads us to a little speech given by Einstein in the class about what education should include and what they are being taught is irrelevant. Mr. Brown was speechless for a few moments. Speechless means he could not say a word. Unable to speak. He was not speaking. He was not capable of express in words. You amaze me, Einstein, he said at last. Don't you realize that one can always look most things up in books? That applies to all the facts you learned at school. The teacher, the history teacher, Mr. Brown, said, you amaze me. You amaze me, Einstein. To amaze means to astonish or to stun, to surprise. He said, you surprise me greatly. He said, at last. At last means finally. And he continued saying that, don't you realize, don't you understand that one can always look most things up in books? He said that, don't you understand that for most of the things you can always go and search for them in the book? That applies to all the facts you learn at school. That applies means that is true for all the facts, for everything you learn at school. When Albert said, I can't see any point in learning dates, I can't see any point means I don't see any sense. I don't see any sense in learning dates. You can always look them up in a book. So Albert replies, "Yes, sir." "Then I suppose you don't see any point in learning facts." The teacher tells him, "I suppose you don't see any sense, any point in learning facts, any meaning in learning facts." And Einstein says, "Frankly, sir, I don't." Frankly means honestly. It means directly. Here it means honestly. Einstein answers, "Honestly, sir, I don't. I don't see any point in learning facts. I don't see any meaning of learning the facts." Fact refers to some truth, a thing that is known or proved to be true. Mr. Brown continues, "Then you don't believe in education at all?" "Oh, yes, sir, I do. I don't think learning facts is education." Here, Einstein says that learning facts is not education. He says, "I do believe in education, but I don't think learning facts is called education." Mr. Brown continues, "In that case," said the history teacher with heavy sarcasm, "perhaps you will be so kind as to tell the class the Einstein theory of education." Albert flushed. Here, Mr. Brown, the history teacher, uses heavy sarcasm. Heavy sarcasm means mockery. Sarcasm refers to irony, the use of irony to mock or convey contempt. Sarcasm is usually intended to mock or insult someone. So with heavy sarcasm, the teacher asks him to kindly tell the class his theory of education. What is his theory of education? And Albert flushed. To flush means to blush or to redden, to become red in confusion, typically as the result of illness or strong emotion. Flushed means he became red in face, in confusion. "I think it is not facts that matter, but ideas," he said. "I don't see the point in learning the dates of battles, or even which of the armies killed more men. I'd be more interested in learning why those soldiers were trying to kill each other." This was Einstein's answer. He said that, "I think it is not facts that matter, but ideas, and I don't see any point in learning the dates of battles, or even which of the armies killed more men." He says that he would be more interested in learning why those soldiers were killing each other in the first place. On hearing this, his teacher said, "That's enough." Mr. Brown's eyes were cold and cruel. "We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein. You will stay in for an extra period today, although I don't imagine it will do you much good. It won't do the school any good either. You are a disgrace. I don't know why you continue to come." This is what Mr. Brown, his history teacher, says. That's enough. His eyes were cold and cruel. Cruel means fierce or brutal, inhuman. He says, "We don't want a lecture from you." Lecture means a speech or talk. It means an educational talk to an audience, especially one of students in a university. "We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein." Lecture also refers to scolding, something given as a scolding or reprimand. So Mr. Brown says, "We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein. You will stay in for an extra period today." To stay in means to remain. He will stay in school as a punishment. He will stay in for an extra period, although he says, "I don't imagine it will do you much good. Nothing will change, even if you stay." So he continues saying that it won't do the school any good either. You are a disgrace. Disgrace means shame, insult, or dishonor. You are a disgrace. I don't know why you continue to come. And Einstein says, "It's not my wish, sir," he pointed out. To point out means to show or to direct. Then you are an ungrateful boy and not to be ashamed of yourself. I suggest you ask your father to take you away. Mr. Brown says, "Then, in that case, you are an ungrateful boy." Ungrateful means unthankful, somebody who is not feeling or showing gratitude. And he says you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Ought to be means here should be. You should be ashamed of yourself. Ashamed means embarrassed or guilty because of one's actions. He further says that I suggest you ask your father to take you away. Albert felt miserable when he left school that afternoon. Not that it had been a bad day. Most days were bad now. Anyway, but because he had to go back to that hateful place the next morning. He only wished his father would take him away, but there was no point in even asking. He knew what the answer would be. He would have to stay until he had taken his diploma. After this, Albert felt miserable. He felt horrible. Miserable means being in a pitiable state of distress or unhappiness. Miserable means something causing extreme discomfort or unhappiness. So he felt miserable. He felt horrible when he left school that afternoon. Not that it had been a bad day, because most days were bad now. He was miserable. He felt miserable because he had to go back to the school the next morning. He says, hateful place. Hateful means horrid, awful. Hateful place refers to the school. Albert only wished his father would take him away, but there was no point in even asking. Nothing would change. He knew that the answer would be he would have to stay until he had taken his diploma. Here we find out that Mr. Brown was amazed that Einstein didn't believe in learning facts. According to Einstein, learning facts was not education at all. He thought that ideas were more important than facts. So Mr. Brown was shocked and furious. He believed that Einstein had no desire to learn and was wasting his father's money. Mr. Brown did not agree with Einstein's views on education. He punished him by asking him to stay for an extra period in school. He also told Einstein that he was a disgrace to the school and ought to be ashamed of himself. He suggested Einstein to call his father to take him away. That is why Einstein felt miserable that day. He wished his father would take him away. His father was not rich, So Einstein lived in one of the poorest areas of Munich. Going back to his lodgings did not cheer him up. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. He did not mind the bad food and lack of comfort, or even the dirt and squalor, but he hated the atmosphere of slum violence. His landlady beat her children regularly, and every Saturday her husband came drunk and beat her. So on the way back to his lodgings refers to a place of residence, some temporary accommodation or living quarters, a room or rooms rented out to someone, usually in the same residence as the owner. So going back to his place did not cheer him up. To cheer up means to become happier, to become or make someone happier or less sad. This too did not cheer him up. Going home did not cheer him up. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. His family was poor. His father had so little money to spare. To spare means here to afford to spend. He had not much money to afford to spend, so Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. Quarters here means areas. They lived in one of the poorest areas of Munich. Munich is a city in Germany. He did not mind the bad food and lack of comfort. Lack of comfort means shortage of comfort. Persons who are lacking in comfort are uncomfortable or experiencing discomfort. He didn't mind bad food and lack of comfort, or even the dirt and squalor. Squalor means dirt, filth, the state of being extremely dirty and unpleasant, especially as a result of poverty and neglect. But he hated the atmosphere, the ambience of slum violence. Slum violence refers to fights in these dwellings, the fights in the poorest areas of the town. Slum refers to overcrowded urban street or district inhabited by very poor people. His landlady is a mistress. His landlady beat her children regularly at a regular intervals. Regularly means at a regular basis. And every Saturday her husband came drunk and beat her. But at least you have a room of your own, which is more than I can say, said Yuri when he called round in the evening. Here we meet Albert's friend Yuri. Yuri tells him that day in the evening that you are lucky to have a room of your own, which is more than I can say. It means I cannot say I have a room of my own. And Albert replies, at least you live among civilized human beings, even if they all are poor students. Civilized means polite or well-mannered. Albert tells him that at least you live among polite human beings, even if they are all poor students. And Yuri says, they are not all civilized. Did you not hear that one of them was killed last week in a duel? Duel refers to a combat or fight between two people. Usually, duel means a contest with some weapons arranged between two people in order to settle a point of honor. Here it means it was fight between two people. And what happens to the one who killed him? Albert asks. Nothing, of course. He is even proud of it. His only worry is that the authorities have told him not to fight any more duels. He is upset about this because he hasn't a single scar on his face to wear for the rest of his life as a badge of honor. This is the reply that Yuri gives. He says nothing happens to the one who killed him. He is even proud of it. His only worry is that the authorities have told him not to fight any more duels. Authorities refers to the officials. There is no punishment for the one who killed him. The only punishment is he will be told not to fight any more duels. And Yuri says he is upset about it because he hasn't a single scar on his face. He hasn't means he doesn't have a single scar. Scar refers to an injury mark. He doesn't have any scar on his face to wear for the rest of his life as a badge of honor. A badge means a sign, as a badge of honor means a mark or expression of pride, some mark of pride. A badge of honor, to wear something as a badge of honor, is a phrase. It means reinterpret something said to be negative about oneself as positive. It means to consider something to be a point of pride, especially that which is typically considered negative. "Ugh," exclaimed Albert, "and these are the students." "Well, you'll be a student one day," said Yuri. "I doubt it," said Albert glumly. "I don't think I'll ever pass the exams for the school diploma." Glumly means sadly or gloomy, in a disappointed or unhappy way. Albert answers in a glumly way, in a sadly manner. He says, "I don't think I'll ever pass the exams for the school diploma." So after being punished by his history teacher, which is not new, Albert goes back home. Then the lesson talks about how Albert disliked his neighborhood because of all the slum violence, and then he compared it to his best friend Yuri. He compared his neighborhood with Yuri's neighborhood. Yuri didn't like his neighborhood either. So here we meet Yuri. He was Einstein's good friend and a very helpful person. He told his cousin Elsa the same next time she came to Munich. Normally, she lived in Berlin, where her father had a business. "I'm sure you could learn enough to pass the exams, Albert, if you tried," she said. "I know lots of boys who are much more stupid than you are, who get through. They say you don't have to know anything. You don't have to understand what you are taught. Just be able to repeat it in the exams." So this is where we meet Elsa. Albert even expresses his worries to his cousin Elsa from Berlin, who thinks he can pass if he made a little effort. Elsa is Einstein's cousin, who is advising him that he will eventually succeed if he continues in his school. Cousin means a relative. Elsa lived in Berlin, where her father had a business, and she told Albert that She's sure he could learn enough to pass the exams, if he only tried. She also says, I know lots of boys who are much more stupid than you, and they also get through. Get through means they also succeed. They manage to pass. They say you don't have to know anything. You don't have to understand what you are taught. Just be able to repeat it in the exams. Here, Elsa, Albert's cousin, says that he doesn't have to understand what he is taught. He just has to repeat it in the exams. And Albert says that's the whole trouble. He says that's the point. I'm not good at learning things by heart. Here, Einstein says that that's the point of this whole thing. He says that he's not good at learning something by heart. Learning something by heart means remembering things perfectly. It means to memorize something perfectly so that it can be written, recited, or performed without thinking. This means learning things by heart. Another expression, rote learning, refers to learning things without understanding them. And as Albert says, this is the point. This is the problem. He says, I'm no good at learning things by heart. So Elsa says, you don't need to be good at all. Anyone can learn like a parrot. Elsa tells him that he doesn't have to be good. He just has to learn like a parrot. To learn like a parrot means to learn without understanding the meaning, just repeating. If you learn or repeat something in so-called parrot fashion, it means you do it accurately but without really understanding what it means. She continues by saying, you just don't try. And yet I always see you with a book under your arm, she added. What is the one you are reading? And he says, a book on geology. So Elsa says, he doesn't have to understand anything. He just has to repeat it. And she says, you don't try. And yet, surprisingly, she says, I always see you with a book under your arm. You're always carrying a book. What is the one you are reading? And Einstein says, a book on geology. Geology is a science related to the study of Earth. Geology, rocks and things, do you learn that? And Einstein says, no, we have hardly any science at school. Then why are you studying it? Because I like it. Isn't that a good enough reason? Elsa sighed. Here, Einstein says, there is hardly any science in school, and I study it because I like it, and that should be a reason good enough. On hearing this, Elsa sighed. To sigh means to exhale, to emit a long, deep, audible breath, expressing sadness, relief, tiredness, and so on. You are right, of course, Albert, she said, but it won't help you with diploma. Apart from books on science, his only comfort was music, and he played his violin regularly until his landlady asked him to stop. That wailing gets on my nerves, she said. There is enough noise in this house, with all the kids howling. Elsa said, you're right, Albert. but this won't help you with your diploma. This was Elsa's opinion. Apart from books and science, Albert's only comfort was music. Comfort means a state of physical ease and freedom from pain or constraint. His only comfort was music, and he played his violin regularly until his landlady asked him to stop. "That wailing gets on my nerves," she said. Wailing means weeping in a shrill voice. Here it means long shrieking sound made by the violin. It gets on my nerves. It means it is irritating. It is annoying me. She also said there is enough noise in this house with all the kids howling. Howling means crying or producing a long wailing sound. The landlady says there is already enough noise in the house, so you should stop playing the violin. Albert was tempted to point out that most of the time it was she who made them howl, but he decided it was better to say nothing. Albert was tempted. Tempted means to have an urge or some inclination to do something. He was tempted to point out, to tell her that most of the time it was she who made them howl, who made her children cry. But then he decided it was better to keep silent. "I must get away from here," he told Yuri, after 6 months alone in Munich. "It is absurd that I should go on like this. In the end, it will turn out I have been wasting my father's money and everyone's time. It will be better for all if I stop now." Albert confides in Yuri, in his friend, that he should get away from there. After 6 months alone in Munich, he says it is absurd that I should go on like this. Absurd means silly, ridiculous, nonsense. He also said that in the end it will turn out. To turn out means it will end like this. To turn out means it will end in such result that I have been wasting my father's money all this time. And he says everyone's time as well. It will be better for all if I just quit, if I stop now. Yuri says, "And then what will you do?" "I don't know. If I go to Milan, I'm afraid my father will send me back. Unless..." Now, Albert Einstein gets an idea. He says that if I go to Milan, I'm afraid my father will send me back. But now he gets an idea. His eyes gleamed with a sudden idea. To gleam means to shine, to glimmer, to shine brightly. His eyes gleamed. His eyes shone brightly with a sudden idea. And he asked, "Yuri, do you know any friendly doctors?" "I know a lot of medical students, and some of them are friendly," said Yuri. "Doctor? No. I've never had enough money to go to one." "Why?" Here we can see that Yuri knows a lot of medical students, and some of them are friendly, but he doesn't know any doctor. He says, "I have never had enough money to go to the doctor." "Why?" Albert says, "Suppose that I had a nervous breakdown. Suppose a doctor would say it's bad for me to go to school and I need to get right away from it. Nervous breakdown means mental illness. It's a weakening of nerves. The term nervous breakdown is sometimes used by people to describe a stressful situation in which they are temporarily unable to function normally in day-to-day life. It's commonly understood to occur when life's demands become physically and emotionally overwhelming. This is Einstein's idea. He says, suppose that I had a nervous breakdown. And suppose, let's imagine. Suppose means let's imagine. Let's imagine a doctor would say it's bad for me to go to school and I need to get away from school. This is his idea. So we found out that Albert even expressed his worries to his cousin Elsa. Later on, he talks again to his friend Yuri and he starts making a plan how to get out of school. He suddenly gets an idea that involves a doctor who is willing to help him. He wanted the doctor to know that he had had a nervous breakdown and he wanted the doctor to prescribe that the root cause of it is school and he shall stay as far away from it as he could. This was his plan. We know that Einstein was doubtful about passing his exams for the school diploma. He is explaining his helplessness by saying that he is no good at learning things by heart. So when he speaks to Yuri, he asks him if he knew a doctor who could give him a certificate, a medical certificate, to show that he had had a nervous breakdown and he should stop going to school. Yuri says, I can't imagine a doctor saying that. I must try, said Albert, to find a doctor who specializes in nerves. To specialize means to have specific training, education, or proficiency or experience in one particular subject, topic, field, and so on. To specialize in means to do a special study. So Albert says, I must try to find a doctor who specializes in nerves. Yuri says, there are plenty of them. There are many of them. He hesitated for a moment and then added, rather reluctantly, I'll ask some of the students if they know one, if you like. Yuri is his friend and Yuri wants to help him. He says there are many of these kind of doctors who are specialized in nerves. He also hesitated. To hesitate means to hang back, to pause in indecision before saying or doing something. So he hesitated for a moment and then he added, rather reluctantly. Reluctantly means in a hesitant way, in an unwilling way. He said, I'll ask some of the students if they know one, if you like. Will you? Oh, thank you, Yuri. Albert's eyes were shining. Wait a moment, I haven't found one yet. Oh, but you will. And if I do, I don't know if he'll be willing to help you. So here Albert is very happy that Yuri is, as his good friend, that Yuri is prepared to ask some of the students if they know any doctor. So Albert's eyes were shining. He was very happy. Yuri tells him, but wait, don't thank me. I haven't found any doctor yet. And Albert says, oh, but you will find him. Yuri says, and if I do, I don't know if he'll be willing to help you. To be willing means to be eager or prepared to do something, to be ready to do something. Yuri says, I'm not sure will the doctor be interested or eager to help you. He will, declared Albert. I'm going to have a real nervous breakdown to make it easier for him. He laughed merrily. So Einstein is very unhappy with his school. That is why he says, I'm going to have a real nervous breakdown to make it easier for him. And he laughs merrily. He laughs happily. I've never seen you looking less nervous, remarked Yuri. A day or two at school will soon put that right, Albert assured him. So Yuri remarked. Yuri noticed. To remark means to say something as a comment or to mention. Yuri mentioned that he has never seen him looking less nervous. But Albert says, give me a day or two at school and I will be very nervous. A day or two at school will soon put that right. Will soon make that happen. To put that right means to change or to set right. If you put something right, you correct something that was wrong or that was causing problems. So Albert says, few days in school will change that. I will be very nervous. Albert assured him. To assure means to confirm, to convince, to reassure, to tell someone something positively, to dispel any doubts. Certainly, he had lost his high spirits when Yuri saw him next. When Yuri saw him next, he had lost his high spirits. To lose high spirits means to lose one's vigor, energy, or hope, to become resigned, to be very unhappy. He has lost his high spirits next time when Yuri saw him. And he said, I can't stand it any longer. To stand something means to tolerate. I can't stand it means I can't bear it. It means to dislike, to be unable to put up with something or someone. For example, you can say, I can't stand the sight of it. Or I can't stand to go in the rain or to leave the country. It means I can't bear. Albert also can't stand it any longer. He can't bear it anymore. He says, I really shall have a nervous breakdown that will satisfy any doctor. I will have such a nervous breakdown that any doctor will be happy to see me. Keep it up then, said Yuri. I found a doctor for you. You have? Albert's face lit up. Oh, good. When can I see him? I have an appointment for you for tomorrow evening, Yuri said. Here is the address. Yuri has found a doctor. First he says, keep it up then. I have found a doctor for you. And on hearing this, Albert's face lit up. His face lit up means he cheered up. His face brightened. And he asked, when can I see him? Yuri said, I have an appointment for you for tomorrow evening. An appointment means fixed meeting. And he gave him the address. Next time, we will read about what happened when Albert meets the doctor. What will happen when Albert will sit with the doctor. Dear students, this is all for today. Have a nice day and see you soon.